Our first brave moderator who is going to give this a shot is Andy Rayner. Andy, come on up. And our panel topic is sustainability. So please, take it away.
Thank you very much, Brad, and good afternoon, everyone in the room. And what I'd like to ask my panelists to do, first of all, I want to welcome to the stage Mr. Thomas Edwards. He's going to come and join me here. I'd like to invite our remote panelists to turn their cameras on, if you can do that. And then, so we have everyone here. Here we go. So, I will just do 2 minutes of introduction, and then I'm going to introduce this wonderful motley crew to you that are spread across the globe that have joined us for this panel session. So, just jumping back into the slide deck here. Many of you will have heard many things about sustainability. Some of the buzzwords or organizations that I put on this slide here are things you may have come across, and some of which we'll be discussing later on. As you're aware, Nevion, the company I work for, was acquired by Sony a couple of years back, and they have this road to zero as a very, very key pivot of the way the way we're working as an organization. So that's helped me to focus myself on some elements of sustainability. There are loads and loads of facts, and one of the things we're going to talk about in the panel session is which facts are real and which are not, because there's lots of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, I think, in things that are being quoted. But I heard one comment the other day that there's over 10 tons of CO2 generated for every hour of content produced. That may be wildly underestimated or overestimated, but there's lots of kinds of figures being touted. So I thought it would be good to actually get a few people that actually know what they're talking about in the industry to actually join me to actually share their insights, what their companies are doing and what their passions are. So I've got these four esteemed guests. As Thomas is in the room, I'm going to ask Thomas, would you like to intro yourself to maybe the one or two people that don't know you in the room?
Okay, 2-2. Hey, I'm Thomas Edwards. I'm a Principal Solutions Architect at Amazon Web Services in media and entertainment, specializing in broadcast. Some of you may know me from my time at PBS or my time at Fox and then later Disney after the acquisition, spending about 20 years in the broadcast engineering industry. A big fan of VSF on the board of directors. And recently, I've got two young kids. They're 11 years old, twins. They're wonderful. And I do worry a bit about what their future is going to be like and what their children's future is going to be like. And we know that there are a lot of changes happening in the climate with changes in the emissions in the atmosphere. So when I got the opportunity to take on some sustainability issues in media and entertainment at AWS, I got really excited. So this is something that I feel very passionate about. I'm hopeful that we've got solutions. I'm not a catastrophist, but I think that we've got some real opportunities to move forward in this area.
Thank you, Thomas. Right, okay, let's move through. I think we'll start with Barbara. So those of you top right on our screen here. Barbara, hello. First of all, tell us where as well as what you are and what you do, where you are and how cold you are at the moment. That's important to understand.
So I also have to apologize that my voice, I had the distinct good timing to lose my voice just today, so apologies for that. So many of you may know me as the executive director of SMPTE. I left at the end of 2021 and spun up my new consultancy called Kibo 121 in January 2022 to really look at sustainability in the media tech sector very specifically. Actually, my business is looking at the post set. So really looking at all of the attributes that happen once content is wrapped and thrown into the digital domain. I, like Thomas, have a great deal of interest in this topic. And, there's no doubt that the climate is changing. There's a lot of things that we can do, but actually you can look at it also from a business opportunity perspective. And if you operate more efficiently, hopefully you'll also operate in a sustainable way and also have a good ROI. And to answer Andy's question, I am sitting in my home in White Plains, New York, with about 3 inches of snow on the ground. So lucky you people who are out there enjoying that beautiful Southern California weather.
Thank you very much, Barbara. I have to say, as I said this morning to the group here, I always come with great expectations of good weather over here. So this year has been more disappointing than any other I remember for LA weather. Anyway, let's go north and talk to Athena. Hello, introduce yourself and tell us how cold you are.
It's pretty cold. My name is Athena Trastelis. I am with CBC Radio Canada, so I'm based in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. We've got about 5 to 10 centimeters on the ground. We're expecting about 30 centimeters of snow by the end of the week, so we're bracing for a storm. As I said, I'm with CBC Radio Canada. I'm their Senior Manager of Environmental Sustainability. I've been with the corporation for about 15 years now, and I have a health and safety background, and I've migrated into environmental sustainability, and have been in the field for about 11 years now. As Thomas had indicated, I have young children. This is of great importance to me because it keeps me up at night, and my role is mainly looking at the corporate footprint and how we as an organization can get to eventually net zero. That is our long-term goal, but there's quite a bit of work that we need to do in order to achieve it, and I'm responsible for our corporate environmental footprint and how are we going to get there, that pathway to get there.
Wow, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And last but certainly not least, we're going over the big pond back to where I came from, and Mr. Geoff Wolf.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me at your conference. I've never actually physically been to VidTrans, but here I am virtually from North Yorkshire, which is in the north of England in the United Kingdom. I work for the BBC. I started as an engineer in 1985. I've been there quite a while, but I did spend 12 years outside the BBC and then came back. I've moved into sustainability last year. I'm the lead project manager for sustainability for the BBC's technology divisions. There's only me at the moment. I've got a lot of volunteers who are helping me on their day job, but it is only me full time. And I'm trying to set up our technology and product departments to achieve their sustainability goals. Thank you very much.
What I would say is to everyone in the room here, there is a microphone center aisle. If any of you have got a key thing you would like to contribute to, don't wait till the end. Do feel free to step up to the microphone and we'll try and incorporate your point in the flow as we go. So, key question number one is motivation. Why should us care about this? I think Athena, maybe you'd like to go first on this. So what are the motivations for us to actually care about sustainability?
So, there are multiple different motivations in this particular situation and in this particular field. Everybody has a personal one. I mentioned just off the top, for me, it's my children. They're my main motivation. And I want to make sure that I'm leaving a legacy that I can be proud of, that they can be proud of. They can look back and look at the achievements that I've done in order to say that I've done something for them and for their future. But really, we should be caring about this because climate change is real. There's a lot of the science clearly, my apologies. The science clearly shows that climate change is real. We have seen drastic changes in weather patterns. We have seen different news footages from all around the world of different events that all have a climate piece behind it, including some of the events that have happened here in Canada. Last year there were 2 big ones with regards to flooding and even the cold snaps that have been happening down in the U.S. and Texas in the last couple of years. There's a lot of different things happening in the world right now that we need to be mindful of and recognize that we have an impact. And we really should start looking at what that impact is, where we're going to go, and how we're going to reduce our footprint overall in order to minimize any future damage. Because the damage that we're seeing now, the impacts that we're seeing now, were things that we've done as a society over the last 25 to 50 years. So what impact are we going to, what impact are we going to leave? What legacy are we going to leave behind?
Thank you, Barbara. So, what drives us as organizations to actually do something about it? So there's one thing about caring personally. Both Thomas and Athena have testified to that. But as organizations, what are some of the drivers that actually incentivize us to actually consider looking at this area?
Yeah, it varies also. I think you have to look at different parts of the world where there are different drivers and incentives. And here in the U.S., our motivations are different. We don't have mandates or regulations yet, as are happening in other parts of the world. So the motivators have to be different. They are often driven by either grassroots from the rank and file staff, or there's a mandate from higher up. The biggest driver right now in the U.S., of course, is through these investment ESG investors. They are starting to drive. It's a very messy place, though. As if you're reading the mainstream media, you will know that ESG investing is very messy right now. There are no standards about how organizations are rated, and it's a little bit of self-rating. So that's problematic. But I think that will sort itself out. And once the SEC here in the U.S. is about to make a statement, the thinking is that by April they will do so, that will require listed companies to report on their sustainability efforts along with their financial filings. Once that happens, I think that's going to really trigger a lot more. And even companies who are not listed, if they want to work with those organizations, are going to have to supply data. So I think it's early days. Of course, Europe is very different, and there's lots of regulation and mandates. And so you can see also they're about 5 years ahead of what's happening here in the U.S. So
Barbara,
motivators.
Do you want to define what ESG stands for when you say ESG investor for our group?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So ESG investing is environmental, social, and governance investing, which means that organizations who have that philosophy will talk to those aspects as part of their business, right? And so a lot of listed companies will say that they are approaching sustainability with that lens. It also means things like corporate social responsibility activities like DEI is a part of that definition. And the general term for this ESG investing, or investing with that mindset, is called ESG investing.
Thank you. Thomas, do you have anything else on the motivation side, apart from your personal interest?
Are you able to put up that slide with the different media companies?
Yes, I think
so,
I am.
I mean, something that really struck me as I began looking into this is, sustainability is not just a good idea. It may already be on your roadmap. Raise your hand if you're aware if your company has a sustainability goal. Okay. So we've got a couple of folks. Now, often people don't necessarily know. If we can get the slide up. So Amazon, of course, has a very significant sustainability goal. We were the founders of the net zero project by 2040. In order to I think it's called the Carbon Pledge. In order to say that we'll be net zero across our operations by 2040. Meaning basically our carbon emissions will be matched by any carbon sinks by that point. Also, by 2025, we'll be operating on 100% renewable energy. And most recently, we also announced that we'll be water positive, actually returning more water back to our communities than we use by 2030. But there are others up here as well. Geoff, obviously with BBC, net zero by 2030, BT, 2031, Comcast. Anyone from Comcast out there? No? You know, everybody. Okay, 2035, ITV, Netflix is supposedly already there. Sony, of course, is in there, and Disney. So you can see these major media and entertainment companies who may already be your customers already have corporate-wide sustainability goals. And I think the questions for us as video engineers is how are we going to help translate the corporate top-level sustainability goals into our day-to-day engineering operations.
Thank you. And last but not least, again, Geoff, what's your thoughts on this motivation side?
Well, a lot of great things have been said there, but I think there's also, the passion that Athena showed for climate change and how we've all got to address this was really quite emotional. So thank you for that. But from my perspective, there's a few fundamental things here. We're finding at the BBC really difficult in terms of employee retention, because people want to work for sustainable companies, and we can't pay the best because we're public service. So we're always trying to look for the kudos factor for coming to want to work at the BBC, and the fact that we take sustainability seriously is actually quite helpful for employee retention. Very prosaic, but actually quite important. Regulatory in Europe, it's really, becoming sustainable isn't just something you do out of a desire, it's actually something you have to do as an organisation of a certain size. And there's cost as well, in terms of two forms that probably in US audience we've got there, probably not quite caught in the press how expensive energy is in Europe now. So to give you an idea, electricity in Europe has tripled since 2020 in cost. And suddenly it's just the finance team, we're also getting interested in sustainability now in terms of how can we reduce our energy use. And that's becoming quite an important factor. And the last one is particularly important for sort of a blue chip broadcaster like the BBC is reputational risk. And something that we advocate you all perhaps go and look at, which is the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, TCFD, and I put the link in the end of the pack. And we've been working to try and work out the financial cost of the risk exposure of climate change. It's a very interesting initiative. It's actually driven by the finance community to try and actually, rather cynically, you could say, try and work out for underwriters what the value of the risk of climate change is. But it's having a really important impact in that the finance community are really beginning to realise this is something we need to worry about. And we've worked on the reputational risk for the BBC, and you might not be aware, but we get a lot of our income from our licence fee, because we're publicly funded, but we get about a quarter of our income from selling programmes abroad. And they've identified that and you're probably aware of our major products we sell abroad are our wildlife programs, and they're beginning to clock. If we're not actually walking the walk and talking the talk and can't, show we've got our own house in order, the reputational risk, if we lose that, our reputation as being a sustainable broadcaster are significant. And the value on that, I can't share you, but I can tell you it's an eye-wateringly big number. So there's two elements to the cost. There's the reputational risk that your organisation might face, plus the actual cost of the energy. And, I could give you some numbers about how much it costs to power some of our buildings. It's absolutely terrifying.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. What I'd like to do now is look at the fundamentals of the challenge and go back to what the United Nations has said about this. And I wonder, Barbara, could you kick us off on if you like, back to the basics of the challenge we're looking at here?
Sure. Thank you. So if you, as I did when I got into this space, started out at the UN, and the UN has there's many acronyms that you have to understand, not just ESG or TCFD or CSRD. You have to understand the interconnection between all of these. There's the IPCC, which is the Intergovernment Panel on Climate Change, which is the organization which is delivering all the reports that we often hear about when we're consuming content in the mainstream press. There are the science-based target initiatives, which are setting the targets that each of us want to follow. There's the greenhouse gas protocols, which are defining scope 1, 2, and 3, which we'll talk about, I think, later on. So there's a variety pack, like every industry, on acronyms and how they sit together that you have to understand. And the other point I would make is that sustainability, as Andy showed in one of his slides, is really when we talk about sustainability, we often lead with the environmental concerns, but sustainability is really that intersection of environmental, social, and economics, because you can't arrive at a sustainable future if you don't take into account the human factors as well as the economic factors. The UN set out these so-called SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and those highlighted in the circles are kind of the ones that, roughly speaking, deal with environmental issues. But you can see there are 17 of them. And when you think about the full picture of sustainability, you might not think about gender equality or quality education, but that's all part of this whole initiative. That is to pretty much improve the well-being of humanity at the end of the day. So we may only be focusing on one specific area in our businesses, but the true sustainability effort is really taking into account all of those other attributes.
Thank you. Athena, do you want to talk us through? I know Barbara touched on the scope, and when I first started trying to understand this, I heard lots of talk about this. Do you want to just talk us through basically what the fundamental principles of these scopes are?
I'd be happy to. So I'm going to throw another acronym out to everybody, the GHG protocol. So that's also known as the greenhouse gas protocol. So much of what Geoff and Barbara have mentioned are things that we are currently evaluating as a corporation right now at CBC Radio-Canada. But in order to determine what our net zero will be, the first thing that any organization has to do is determine what their scopes 1, 2, and 3 emissions are. And what that is a piece of the greenhouse gas protocol, which looks at 3 elements. It's categorized all your emissions into one of 3 scopes. Scope 1 are emissions that are directly attributed to the organization, and it's usually from your owned assets. So it could be the infrastructure that you're operating, your own facilities, any company vehicles, any halocarbon or any releases you may be environmental releases that your organization may be releasing into the environment. Scope 2 are indirect emissions related to your purchased energy. So you're looking at things like electricity, steam, anything that powers your organization, but the electricity as a whole is covered under Scope 2. And that's an indirect emission as a result of your operations. Thirdly, the Scope 3 piece is basically everything else. Indirect emissions that are attributed to the activities that your organization is doing, but you don't necessarily have a direct impact on. So a really great example would be your leased facilities or travel, business travel. You don't have any control over the airlines and the type of fuel that the airline is using in order to get you from point A to point B. But the fact that you're traveling is part of your core business, so you need to incorporate the emissions as a result of that travel into your overall footprint. And what most organizations are seeing is that your Scope 3 is significantly larger than your Scopes 1 and 2 together. We as an organization have seen that about 80 to 85% of our emissions are coming from Scope 3 emissions, and the vast majority of it is coming from procured goods and services and the relationships with the vendors and the products that we're purchasing. So that is key to what we need to do as an organization in order to reduce our footprint. If you understand where you fit in terms of the Scopes 1, 2, and 3, you'll understand as a vendor what you need to do in order to assist an organization like mine in order to reduce our footprint, because you are somebody else's Scope 3 emissions.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that overview. That's great. Thomas, jumping back into the room here, looking at the media and entertainment industry and what that means for us, do you have any comments to that?
Yeah, so we've been tracking a number of media and entertainment workflows which can achieve a higher level of sustainability on the cloud. And one of them is content production. This is when you are able to move your content to the cloud as fast as possible, you can then operate it in the cloud using servers which are often shared with a large number of other customers and other processes, in reducing the amount of idle servers which are just sitting around there doing nothing. So for instance, you can do editing in the cloud. We also have been taking a look at media supply chain. One of our partners, SDVI, is actually now has a net zero project where all of the workflows which are being orchestrated by SDVI Rally in terms of media supply chain, that's all of the transcoding, metadata extraction, closed captions insertion, and things along those lines. All that which is being done is going to be done with mostly with renewable power on AWS, but the bit that's not renewable will be offset with carbon credits that SDVI will be purchasing. The other area which I'm really super excited about is virtualized live production, which I think a lot of folks in this room are interested in, and we're going to have a good talk a little bit later in the afternoon about some things Fox Sports have been doing there. But imagine if you don't have to fly all of your staff around to different venues and have people sitting underneath the stadium running a diesel generator with a big, huge truck to power all the switching and replay and graphics and things along those lines. Instead, imagine if your TD's got his feet up on his porch with his switcher panel in front of him. You don't have to travel anywhere. You are able to reduce the emissions from airline travel. You're able to have smaller generators, or better yet, what Amazon Studios has been doing recently, replacing diesel generators with high-capacity electric batteries on site for production. So those are some of the areas that we're most excited about.
Thank you. Now, a couple of people I think have mentioned on the call that certainly in Europe, I think there has been some good leadership in some of these areas, and the BBC specifically has been looked to as people that have actually grasped the reins on this quite early on. So it'd be good to understand both from Geoff and Athena, from your relative public service broadcaster areas, what initiatives you guys are doing. So can we start with Geoff, with you, from the BBC perspective? Thank you.
Sure, yeah. Andy, could I ask you to jump to slide 25 of our pre-arranged pack? And don't worry, we're not going to go through all 25 slides for those in the audience. We just put some materials together we wanted to jump around to.
That's just coming up any second now. Give me 2 seconds and we're there. It's
okay, so
here we go.
that's not the slide numbers have changed. I wanted to go to the next one, sorry. I think I might be using the previous version. Yeah, thank you. So I just wanted to illustrate to Athena's point about where the carbon footprint sits. So this is not the BBC as a whole. This is just looking at the technology part of the BBC, which obviously will be of interest to me and obviously, hopefully, to the audience. So scope 1 and 2, just a reminder, so that's the fuel that we buy and burn and the electricity that we get through. You can see that's only 2% of our carbon footprint. So basically, our buildings and premises only generate 2% of our carbon footprint. 98% is the scope 3 that Athena mentioned. You can see of the scope 3, 17% is all the other stuff, and we have about 81% is our supply chain in technology, is our carbon footprint. And when you look further into it, this top 6 vendors by spend generate 62% of our carbon footprint in technology within the BBC. So it's a really big thing. So you can drop the slide now, but what I want to show there is that piece of data is what drove the program of projects that I've put together. And it's all largely focused on our supply chain. So the first one is supply chain engagement. So with those top 6 vendors and a couple of others, one-to-one conversations about sustainability, understand what they're doing, get them to communicate and articulate what their carbon footprint is, try and work out and agree a baseline, try and work out a roadmap to reduce that baseline, see if their own carbon reduction targets align with ours. The second one, and this is probably most important because Andy described most of the delegates are from vendors and suppliers. we're actively pursuing being able to put in all new high-value contracts a contracted carbon reduction plan. So not many people have done this in the world yet. It's quite a new area. We haven't committed to it yet as a BBC policy, but it's something we're actively looking at, to the point where we've actually written the clauses of a contract, what it might look like and how we might operationalise it. There's a debate going on now about whether we should make this part of our BBC procurement policies. But where I'm going with this, you can imagine if we don't do it now, we will do it at some point. And actually having awareness of your carbon footprint and controls in place to be able to reduce it over the term of the contract is going to be something we're actively going to be looking at. Another one, very prosaic. At the moment, the financial controls when you make a significant technology investment, the sustainability aspects at the moment are mandatory. From the 1st of April, currently they're optional. From the 1st of April, they'll be mandatory. So all our large investment proposals will need to demonstrate what the carbon footprint of the solution they're replacing is and what the carbon footprint of the solution they're putting in will be. And also in the total cost of ownership will be the change in electricity costs from the new system. So actually looking at what's the cost over the 7-year TCO of this solution going to look like. Another one is very basic, how to switch stuff off. You know, it sounds embarrassing, but in broadcast, we never plan how to switch anything off. I mean, I've been guilty of that. Talking about virtualization, my biggest project pre-coming to this, it's sustainability, was virtualizing all of the technology stack used by the BBC's local radio stations. And we moved from 600 bays of technology distributed across those 40 stations to 16 bays and 2 data centers. They're on-premise data centers. But at no point did we think about, while we were designing this, and I was architecting it, how the hell we'd switch any of it off. So this stuff just left powered working 24/7, even though overnight they're just rebroadcasting somebody else's material. So we're working out, how to retrofit into existing live systems, how to switch them off. It sounds basic. And one of the key things we're going to be asking whenever we go to market for systems is, how do you switch your technology off when it's not in use? And anyone that sells an orchestration product, that looks across, a network of stuff, a part of that, a requirement we're going to be looking for is which bits are actually doing something, and those bits that are not, either maybe not switch them hard down, but how do we put them into a low power idle state? That's kind of another key thing we're going to have. And the last thing I'm looking at and doing, much simpler, is just staff engagement and raising awareness of sustainability with the technology community within the BBC.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we'll come back to that orchestration one a little bit later on. Oh, can we just, can I just go to Athena first? Because I know Athena's got a tight schedule, so I'd love to get just a view from the CBC perspective, then we're going to come back to Thomas. So Athena, over to you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Only I have, and I apologize, I will be signing off after this. I have to pick up my children from daycare. As a corporation, what CBC Radio-Canada has done over the last couple of years is actually roll out our first environmental sustainability strategy. And for those of you who are interested, it's called Greening Our Story. And as I mentioned at the top of the conversation, I wear the corporate hat. So I developed the strategy in conjunction with our sustainability committee, and I'm the chair of that committee, and we're a cross-functional group. And what we did was look at where the opportunities existed within the organization to embed sustainable thinking in all we do. That is the vision of our strategy. So what we did was look at where we can implement opportunities in production. And one of our pillars is sustainable production, so producing sustainably, and how we're going to engage the industry in Canada to consider the environment and reduce their footprint in all the productions that they're implementing. And one of the things that we did was implement a mandatory requirement for all independent productions to provide a carbon footprint for their productions. And for those that do not provide a carbon footprint analysis, what they're required to do is give us a green sustainability plan that will outline where the opportunities lie in order for them to reduce that footprint. So we had a threshold of $300,000. So any organization, any independent production over $300,000 has to complete the calculation Otherwise, they submit a production plan. The second pillar of our strategy is related to the decarbonization of our infrastructure. So looking at our fleet and how we're going to transition to electric vehicles, looking at the energy that we're consuming as an organization, and looking at the engineering pieces to reduce our footprint. Where do the opportunities lie? Something as simple as LED retrofits in our studios. And one of the things that we're looking at is how can we possibly get our studios in Toronto and in Montreal certified to the Albert standard that exists in the BBC, with BAFTA. And I'm sure the BBC is further ahead than we are on that piece of it, but we're working on it. Geoff mentioned the procurement piece, and that's huge with us right now. We're diligently working on creating a code of conduct for our vendors. We're looking at implementing criteria, sustainability criteria, not just on the environmental piece, but on the EDI piece of it, and making sure that the criteria there is aligned with where we see our vision as an organization, and ensuring that the vendors we're working with, the products that we're purchasing, are to the most part sustainable, and looking for those opportunities. And there's quite a bit of work that we've been doing, and we're tailoring our approach based on the products that we're purchasing, recognizing that if we're looking to replace the transmission tower, our options for vendors are limited as opposed to, for instance, a new computer, right? So we're weighing where the opportunities lie and trying to work with our vendors. We have not yet identified, we're not as far along as the BBC in knowing who our top 6 vendors are, or even who our top 5 vendors are, but we're working on analyzing that as part of this current strategy. And then finally, I mean, there's quite a bit of stuff happening in the organization, but we're working on TCFD reporting. We're working on our annual environmental reporting and enabling our audiences to understand where they have an impact, and looking at green storytelling, and making sustainability not an add-on to the work that we're doing, but something that's core to the work that we're doing, whether it's the content we're producing, the images that we're sharing on our television screens and film. I see Barbara put her hand up, so she's probably going to add something to that, and I'll stop here. But there's quite a bit happening in our organization. I'm particularly proud of it. I'm very excited about where we're going, and I'd invite everybody to please take a look at our annual environmental report for all the detail of what we've been working on and where we're going. And probably in the next 2 minutes, I'm going to say farewell, but I'll let Barbara go from there.
Wonderful, thanks, Athena. And if you have to disappear, then that's fine. Thank you for being with us. I saw Barbara's got a comment, but let's just come back to Thomas if he's holding the comment that he was going to make a couple of minutes back.
Yeah, I think Athena and Geoff both talked about making sure vendors are aligned with the customer sustainability goals. I know the Digital Production Partnership has launched its Committed to Sustainability mark. Is that something that both of you are looking at as you choose vendors? Maybe I'll ask Athena first, and she's got to run.
It's early days for us. We're still just about trying to understand what our purchases are and where those opportunities lie, and where we can add that criteria into the RFP process, as an example, another acronym. So it's coming. We're not there yet. We know that this is those exercises are part of the strategy that we've established to date. I'm starting to look at our future strategy and what our strategy will look like. That will be incorporated as part of the official next strategy, but we're doing the legwork now so that we could see where that would fit in, yes.
Thank you. Geoff, do you want to comment on that as well, or not?
It's a complex thing when you're publicly funded. When you're procuring, you can't be seen to be excluding any supplier, so you have to tread very carefully. So if you do say, we're going to be looking for X, and you're going to exclude people because they haven't got whatever certificate you want to look for, that's a very difficult. You can certainly weight the procurement and say, yes, if they've got that, they score points, but you can't, it's very difficult to exclude people. So yes, we will look at it, but as I say, it won't be a barrier to entry. At this stage, I say that work we're doing on procurement policy might up the ante on that, but as we speak of today, it wouldn't be a barrier to entry.
Thank you. Thank you. Barbara, you looked like you were itching to say something as Athena was talking there. So do you want to have your moment now?
Sure, and I'm sorry, Athena, I didn't mean to cut you off. But one thing you did say prompted my attention, and that is that a lot of what we're talking about is really change management. It's how you are organized, as how you do your business. Sustainability and the issues around it are more and more going to have to be pulled up into your business planning. So just like you care about your strategic planning efforts, just like you care about your financial budgets when you're developing a new product or service, you need to attach sustainability right alongside it. Once you do that, every decision you make is going to have that sustainability angle, and it presumably, I think, will become much easier as you proceed. The other thing that I would say, and maybe we'll get into this, or maybe this is the pivot, is that measurement and what to measure, how to report has really been driven by the financial sector, as has already been stated. So groups like the Greening of Streaming, for example, are trying to look at it from a technology perspective. And there's a lot more work to be done about having standards around how to measure, what to measure, how to attribute energy to which organizations touching content and so on. So we're early days, I think, in really understanding that component to this.
Thank you. And staying with you for a moment, Barbara, I'm very aware that there seems to be a lot of concern about what is genuine truth about sustainability facts and genuine truth about sustainability practices by organizations. Certainly in the UK, we hear lots of stories about companies buying forests and then trying to pretend they've actually got an offset against things where they haven't actually done anything other than acquire assets. And there's all sorts of strange things happening. And so it strikes me that measuring and accountability in a genuine sense are both vitally important. Have you any comments on how we're doing on this? Is it a problem? And if so, how should we move forward?
So let's call it greenwashing. It is a problem. I think it is a problem because there is a lot of noise in the ecosystem. So I mentioned the ESG side. There are no standards about how organizations are measured in the rating services, so that's a problem. There's a lot of acronyms being tossed around. There's a lot of differences in how people approach it, as Thomas showed with his net zero chart of the different organizations. So I think we're in the early stages of awareness building, and I think I would like to believe that these companies are not trying to manipulate. They are making statements around things that they seem to know, but enough people, there's not enough people yet working in the space that really understand everything to really cut through that. But I think that's an opportunity then for us as a part of this industry is to, number one, push back on those sorts of things that we might question, and then also to work together to develop standards and best practices and how we can report on these things so that we're all speaking from the same song sheet. Having spent 12 years at Cinti, I know a thing or two about standards and the value they offer, and I think this is part of our industry that needs that too.
Thank you. Thomas.
Yeah, well, we've been trying to move forward with some methods to help our customers reach their sustainability goals. One of them is, some of you may be familiar with the AWS well-architected program, and this is a series of pillars of information about how to well-architect your workloads when you put them on AWS Cloud, including how to save money for you, right? How not to waste money, how to use advanced capabilities such as serverless like Lambda, and also try to be more efficient, more secure, more reliable in your workloads. We've just added a sustainability pillar. So on top of all that, making sure that you're safe, secure, reliable, and efficient in the cloud, you now also have some guidance on how to be more sustainable. The good news is a good way to be more sustainable on the cloud is to not let servers sit there idle, right? Don't let these assets be on the cloud that you don't need them to be. Don't have them be in the highest tier of storage. Be able to move them down to lower tiers of storage like AWS Glacier, which have longer times to retrieve material, but they cost you less and they're actually better for the environment. And we also have released the customer carbon footprint tool, which allows you to actually take a look at your account and see the carbon footprint of your account. Fortunately, if you've been running in one of the 13 AWS regions in 2021 that were covered by 95% renewable energy, already your carbon footprint is pretty low. And by 2025, we expect all of our regions will be running on 100% renewable energy.
Thank you very much. The one thing about greenwashing, for those of you that don't follow it, and Barbara's already mentioned the organization, there's an organization called the Greening of Streaming, which a very energetic guy in the UK is heading up, and Barbara's been working with him on part of this. And their company or their organizational motto is no greenwashing. That's their one push. So as an observation, that's a key issue. Geoff, just going back to you and some BBC thoughts. I know you've got some thoughts on some specific technical initiatives, but also some thoughts on what our carbon footprint is as we move from linear OTA transmitted television to OTT delivered, internet delivered transmission. So do you want to start with maybe firstly with the initiative, one of the other initiatives that you've been looking at as an example?
Yeah, so one of the initiatives is very early days. We're lucky in the BBC that we still have a research and development department, and we're looking to start a project which is going to put some scientific rigor to try and understand what digital first as a strategy means, because the BBC set that as a strategic objective to move our audience to online from traditional transmission over terrestrial and satellite. Too early to report on that. I'm still trying to shape and develop that project up, but it looks like that's going to come a thing. So maybe in a year's time, I might be able to give you some information on that. But something that we've achieved, which I think just goes to show how little change is going to have big impact. So, Andy, would you be able to put up, I'm going to guess it's slide 29, because I was out by one number last time. Thank you very much. So this is an initiative. So in the UK, we have an awful lot of our radio audience listens to the radio through television. So I'm not sure whether that's a thing in the US. Apologies, I'm not a very knowledgeable of media services over there. So something that we did as one of the smaller aspects of our sustainability initiatives is on the left. If you were listening to the radio through the television, you got the graphic on the left, and we've just changed it to the graphic on the right. And if you add up cumulatively across the entire audience, it actually has taken the equivalent of 200 houses off the national grid of the UK. So the national grid is what we call the electricity supply chain across the UK. And that's just estimating 1 watt and change in display power. In reality, we've seen from OLED displays, it's about a 50 watt change. But clearly this audience would know with a backlit display, the change is very minimal. So we've estimated at just 1 watt change per device, and that's equivalent of 200 houses. So what I'm trying to say here, there's some little changes that we can make, which can make some big differences. It's not all about those dramatic moments where we save a gigawatt here, there, or wherever. And the last example, I'm sorry if you stopped screen sharing, Andy, I wanted to go on to the next slide, because this is something and it's very brand new, something we've just begun to think about in the last few months. So what would be slide 30, I'm guessing?
Yep,
we've come up with this idea of eco bars. So all media organizations put color bars up to ident a circuit. That's what VSF and the video codec industry is going to be doing a lot of. So we've just made up, this is just not representative as to what it ends up looking like, but why don't we do an eco bar? So that's largely black with some color bars top and bottom, and where it says example eco bars, it would say circuit 27 to Leeds or whatever, rather than actually having color bars going 24/7 in the control room. And let's face it, we do use a lot of OLEDs because they look good and they use a lot of power. So just an idea to put that out there. We're thinking of approaching one of the standards bodies to work with them, whether that should become a thing across the industry. Again, bit of an early show and reveal on that. We haven't formally gone to any of the standard bodies to discuss that. But that's just an idea we're banding around. Again, thinking about those little changes we could make and have a big impact.
Thank you very much. We're heading to land now. We need to go. So I wonder, Barbara, so we've got a room full of very beautiful people here. I would say largely vendors and service providers that we've got is the main build-up here. So what is as we draw to a conclusion here, what is the parting message or challenge you'd like to give the assembled throng of experts that we have in the room here, from where you are over there?
Yeah. Firstly, I think that having these conversations is an excellent starting point, and even small changes can have a big impact. But as you've just seen today, just being mindful about how you do your operations with an eye towards efficiency gains, and that will then lead to sustainability gains. But it's bigger than that. And as you can see from these two examples of the BBC and the CBC, it takes effort to do it properly to really achieve the nirvana of net zero by 2030. But you have to start somewhere. So start small. Any steps is good, and then build towards a bigger plan as you move forward, integrate it into your strategies now before the government tells you to do it.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Thomas.
Well, I'll say, this is the time to start asking your business leaders and your customers' business leaders, how do your top-level sustainability goals, how is that going to reflect into broadcast engineering? What do I need to do as a vendor to make my devices more sustainable? How can I work with my customers to help their workloads being more sustainable? I personally believe cloud has a lot of excellent opportunities in that area. I'd be glad to talk with you about that. But and overall, you've got to be able to understand what your goals are. You've got to be able to measure them, and then you've got to go in with a plan to execute on them as well.
Thank you. And lastly, Geoff.
Yeah. So for me, 4 things. I've covered a couple of them already, but acknowledge this as a shared problem. We need the supply chain is a huge part of our carbon footprint. We need to reduce the carbon footprint of our supply chain. Number 1. Number 2, improve your carbon accounting maturity. So, I'm encouraging our solution design team, when they're talking to vendors on trade shows, before they ask them the price of a product, say, what's your carbon footprint of your product? Whether they will or not, I don't know, but I'm certainly encouraging that as something they should be doing. New solutions need to consume much less energy. That's not optional. We just need to reduce the energy we're using. And the item I covered earlier was number 4. How do you switch stuff off when it's not in use? That's just something, as engineers, we've never thought about. How do you do that? So those are my 4 takeaways.
Wonderful, thank you very much. So on behalf of everyone here, I would like to say a massive thank you to Athena, who's already disappeared, Thomas is on the stage, to Barbara, and to Geoff. Thank you for your invaluable contributions. We're going to put in the final PDF that we made available, we're going to put a load of hyperlinks in the back, which we're currently collating. So all of the relevant bodies and things that you may want to engage with. Finally, because it's a mixed presentation panel, I thought I ought to give a shout out to coffee as well as tea on the final slide. But do join us whenever you can find us. Many of us, I guess, will be at NAB. So if you want to extend the conversation, if you need those contact details of the panelists as well, do reach out to me if you haven't got them directly already. So can you join with me thanking the Athena, Geoff, Barbara, and Thomas for their input this afternoon? Oh,
Rick, did you have a question?
Rick, did you have it?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Let's hear it. I'm sure you've looked at hundreds of color bars on screens before.
Could you repeat the question?
I see a light. Okay.
I can't hear it here in Yorkshire.
What you were showing, the energy efficient bars, a couple of things to keep in mind. In those small parts of the world where analog may still exist, remember the video is transmitted inverted, so when you go to black, it's maximum power. So you're sucking more power. Also, on LCD TVs, if you don't have local dimming, the backlight, you're taking all that light, making heat, so that you've just turned your TV into a nice radiator. So when you say you're saving power, you really need to check your air conditioning bill, because you're giving off energy. You're pumping energy out from that.
I think we've got a chair for new SIPTI working group on Echo Bars. What do you-
Rick's just been signed up. Thank you for the disruptive input there, Rick. And we are done on this panel, and it's over to Richard. Here we go. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.